Now, one last thing I wanted to do was to go quickly through each of the topics covered in each of the episodes of Behind the Screens. Partly so you could work out what you missed that might be interesting, and partly so you can find the complete set of any multi-part elements that have been covered. As this is the 11th episode, it felt like a good time to go over the first 10. Nice round number and all that. And then I realised that was going to take a while and be really very repetitive. So I'm just going to cover the first 5 this time, and I'll do 6 to 10 next time. Okay? In episode 1, it was all about our Traveller game. Rather more single focus than more recent episodes. I still didn't know exactly what Behind the Screens was going to be. I took people through the virtual tabletop mapping system I built for use with Traveller, called WeRPG for long and complicated reasons. I then went over some of the details of our ongoing campaign, beginning with the Baltic Star herself, discussing the nature of the ship, and using her deck plan as an example map to show how the WeRPG system works. In episode 2, I started the GM's Back Pocket series, covering the useful stuff a GM can easily prepare and have ready for when the players throw the odd curveball into the game. This time covered the 3 real essentials: places, characters and locations. I also began the RPG storytelling series, beginning with structure and the way narratives actually function, not just in RPGs but all forms of stories. I told the strange tale of the fighting fantasy game books and the Steves Jackson, and covered the old-fashioned distinctions between classic campaigns, modules and scenarios for anyone wanting to avail themselves of old resources. I also went over the approach I use for NPC design and making sure they always act as distinct people with real goals and acting in their own self-interest. Finally, I looked at the wargaming origins of RPGs and the ways that element has slowly evaporated from them over time. In episode 3, I continued the GM's Back Pocket series, this time covering techniques to slow down the party when you need a distraction or time to plan. I also covered the history of computer text adventures, rather swiftly, and talked about how people built their own examples. In the second part of the RPG storytelling series, I went through the structure of a story in detail and told literally the worst joke ever written. I finally did a little demonstration of a piece of mapping software called Deep Night RPG Map, in case anyone needs a fast and free mapping solution. In episode 4, I concluded the GM's Back Pocket series with a look at how a description of a world in large scale but with limited detail can be used to rapidly inform the descriptions needed at a moment's notice. In the third part of RPG storytelling, I went through the theory of how RPGs are structured differently to other types of storytelling. And this was the last part of the series because these 3 parts were all about the theory and not the practice. I then did a quick dive into another type of computer game, this time the so-called roguelikes, before jumping straight into a series called RPG Adventures from Scratch, essentially the practical implementation of the rules in the RPG storytelling series. This covered a practical example of an RPG adventure set in a cyberpunk sort of universe. And finally, I took a look at a different piece of mapping software called Dungeon Scrawl. In episode 5, I jumped into another piece of computer game history, this time covering graphical adventures. And in part 2 of RPG Adventures from Scratch, I took a look at the structure of our cyberpunk narrative and introduced the key players and the window on the world. And finally, I took a look at 8-bit emulators that allow people to play old and classic games on modern hardware and demonstrated a few of them. So, that's it for this time. Many thanks, once again, for joining me, and I hope you found it reasonably entertaining. Tomorrow night is Traveller, our ongoing campaign, as our heroes try to deal with the aftermath of some violence and finish off some narrative before leaving Dillabrew, hopefully without wrecking the entire planet this time. On Saturday we're playing Orbital Blues. This is, as we've all been fondly describing it, Firefly Bebop, a new RPG in cowboy space living on our alleged wits. We're early in this game, But we're settling into our characters and off to face our first actual errand. And on Sunday, Luke does not continue in his urgent mission to deliver us the moon, because he delivered it last weekend, in a rather emotional and thoroughly rewarding finale. Okay, it was a little bit depressing, but I am made of stern stuff, and my lip never quivered. As that was the last part of the game, Luke is going to begin a new one on Sunday called Heavy Rain. From what he's told me, it's going to be right up my alley. Narrative, dark and thrilling, and I'll be there to jeer Luke along as usual. I'm sorry, did that come out as jeer? I can't imagine how that happened. And just a quick reminder, because I have no idea exactly when you're watching this, from time to time in our Discord channel we have available seats in upcoming games. I think I'm right in saying the seats available right now are in a Buffy the Vampire Slayer game by some sort of uncanny alignment of the universe. But if you're watching this in the future, there may be wildly different things up there. Also, if you're watching in the future, are flying cars fun? They sound like fun. Until next time, thank you, and may all your rolls be with boons. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Leno. Thank you, Socks. Very nice to have you along. And as always, thank you, Luke.